Good morning and welcome to the George Washington Carver Science Fair at Temple University. I'm Dr. Susan Jansen Varnum. I currently serve as a Senior Associate Dean for Undergraduate Affairs, Science Education, and Community Engagement. I want to encourage all of you to fully participate in the Science Fair and to put your best foot forward. By now, you have all uploaded your registration information into the STEM Wizard software. STEM Wizard is the software that's managing all of the documents for our science fair. I want to take a minute or two to help you to make sure the report information that you must upload shortly is the best it can be. We want to encourage you always to be scientists and to be thinkers. So let's look at what that report should look like. To help you, let me remind you that many resources and materials can be found on the George Washington Carver Science Fair website. There is a handbook that gives you some of the information about what is expected. Let's talk about the report. The rubric for the reported information and your poster session is on page 10 of the handbook that you can find on the website. But what do we have to do to create a good report? A good report starts with a research question. What might that research question be? How about, will Miracle-Gro fertilizer make better tasting tomatoes? That's a research question. How am I going to answer that question? I'm going to have to design an experiment. I'm going to have to design measurements. I'm going to have to make measurements. And then I'm going to have to tell a convincing story. A convincing story to other scientists, a convincing story to the general public, and I'm going to have to convince the judges that I was using the scientific method and that what I've measured is real science. All real science starts with a hypothesis. Sometimes we get hypotheses that don't quite measure up. So what is a good hypothesis? A hypothesis is a testable statement. That means it's a sentence, not a question. It's a sentence. So what might my hypothesis be about my tomatoes? Miracle-Gro makes better tasting tomatoes. End of sentence. I'm going to test, will Miracle-Gro make better making tomatoes? My hypothesis, a simple statement. My overarching research question leads to my hypothesis. And now, here's the more challenging part. I have to create a series of experiments to answer that question. I have to make sure my audience knows what the background is. So what is the background about tomatoes and their taste? Well, I don't know. Over the past years, we've bred tomatoes that we can ship and store for a long time, and they don't taste so good. And now I want to make my tomatoes taste better. So I put in some background references. I put in the background story. What am I going to do in my experiments? What methods am I going to use? When I talk about my methods, I first have to make a list of the materials that are going to be involved. What materials am I going to use? Well, I'm going to use Miracle-Gro fertilizer. I'm going to dissolve it in water. What concentration am I going to use? All of these considerations are part of your materials section. And then what am I going to do? When am I going to give my plants the fertilizer? How much fertilizer am I going to give each of my plants? How am I going to measure the taste of my tomatoes? Am I going to have my family taste them? Am I going to take them to school? Am I going to look at the color of the tomato? Because we think when they look red and beautiful, they taste better. Not always the case. So I have to figure out how I am going to make every measurement and make every test. I will need to create data tables. They need to look neat. Neatness counts. They need to look neat. The numbers need to be legible. I need to have sufficient numbers. I can't just have one measurement. I need a minimum for any measurement of 3. 5 is better than 3. You have limited time and limited resources. 10 is probably excessive. But if you can get 3 to 5 good measurements for every experiment that you do, that's a good number. At the end of it all, I have to use my data to determine if my hypothesis is proven. So I have to have a criteria. are a series of criteria for success. So it may be what the tomato looks like, maybe what the tomato tastes like, and maybe that 4 out of 5 tomato tasters think the fertilized tomatoes taste better, and maybe that 3 out of 5. Okay, I have to decide that, I have to evaluate that, and I have to report that. It is possible that what you have done is publishable. It is possible that after you complete your study, you have lots of other ideas of other things to do with this project or with a related project. We want to capture that, all of that, in what you report. If you look at the rubric that's given in the handbook, you will see that you were scored on your first overarching research question and on your hypothesis, that simple testable statement. You will see that you are given a lot of points for your experimental design. So explain it clearly. Explain the materials. Explain the procedures that you plan to use very clearly. You will see that how you execute and the data you collect is a big part of the evaluation. So create data tables that really represent the high quality of the effort that you're putting in. You will also be scored on creativity. And in part of creativity, we want to know that this is your project, that you have intellectual ownership of this project, that the project design, the experimental design is what you have contributed, not what you have copied from someone else. So the creativity and intellectual ownership of the project is very important. All of this information is summarized on the rubric in page 10 of the handbook, and you can find the link for this information right here on the screen below me. I'm looking forward to another short video on how to create the poster presentation. But for now, you have to work on getting your report information up in the STEM Wizard. Give us a good research question. Write a testable statement. Write a hypothesis. Be very strategic in your experimental planning and methodology. And finally, when you do your data collection, make sure you have enough data. And the data tells the story. When you describe your data, tell the story. And make sure that you have a way to assess if you've met the standard or not, if the hypothesis is proven or disproven. And one last comment, it's okay to disprove your hypothesis. If your data does not support your hypothesis, that is part of science. That is the scientific method that makes you a good scientist. Disproving a hypothesis is as important as proving your hypothesis. I'll see you soon. Take care.